Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I'm your host. Today's episode is Dr. Adrian Ruiz, who is not just a really fantastic trumpet player and flugelhorn player, he's just a beautiful soul as well. He always has something nice to say about different members of the jazz scene, whether it's the young cats that are just coming up or already really established people. If you ask anyone in the jazz scene, they will all say that Adrian Ruiz is just full of love and a really great asset to our community here. So I was glad to have him on for an extended chat. We talk about composition, arranging, and tapping into the embarrassment of riches of jazz musicians we have here in our local scene. We talk about him playing a big band hit with guest artists Terry Gibbs, James Moody, Clark Terry, and Jon Hendricks, which is just wild that they all shared the stage together for this mega concert. So we talk about that and how meaningful it was for him and some pictures that he has that he shows us throughout the course of the episode. And then also earlier in his career, the unexpected side effects of playing lead trumpet in a big band hit, which can include but are not limited to feeling lightheaded, passing out, and then crashing directly onto the drum set in the middle of a big band set. So let's dive right into that so you don't have to wait for the explanation any longer. One of the things that I wanted to plug as we're plugging records like we do every week is that Adrian Ruiz also released his first album as a band leader, which also was full only of originals. It's called Premiere, a collection of originals, and that's on all the streaming platforms that you can go and check out right now. And then also at the link below for his website, you can get a physical copy. If you're like me and you like to have a physical CD to affirm your purchase, then you can get that as well, and it directly benefits the artist without any strings attached. So that's amazing, and if you can do that, I'm sure he would love, and I would love if you support him in that way. The next record that I want to plug is called Silsby, and it's from a power trio of Austin jazz musicians, which include Damian Garcia on piano, Sam Pankey on bass, and Daniel Dufour on drums. Dan was Daniel was our first guest on the podcast, and then Sam and Damian are also going to be future guests as well. I've been bathing in this record all week. I mean, it's full of so many amazing tracks and a really beautiful ballad that has just haunted me for the whole week, which is called Do What You Do. So make sure to go over to Bandcamp. The link is below, and also it's on the streaming platforms as well, and on YouTube Music. If you want to support it there, you can sure do that. And then the next one, the last one for today that I want to plug is one that is very, very special. I've been a fan of Stu Mindeman for a long time. I came to know him through Kurt Elling because Kurt is my guy, but also then I started looking into Stu's direct work on his stuff that's released under his name, and it is just absolutely incredible. This record is called Woven Threads, and the anniversary of that is actually coming up. It released on September 14th of 2018, and Stu was kind enough to put a little bit of a backstory into what he was thinking about whenever he was making this record, and also how all of that influenced the tracks that he picked. And he sent us a little bit of information that we're going to cut to right now. So here's a clip from Woven Threads and a couple words from Stu Mindeman himself. So check it out.
Abre sendas por los cerros, deja su huella en el viento, el águila le da el vuelo y lo cobija el silencio. Nunca se quejó del frío, nunca se quejó del sueño. El pobre siente su paso y lo sigue como ciego. Córrele, córrele, córrela, por aquí, por aquí, por allá. Córrele, córrele, córrela, córrele que te van a matar. Córrele, córrele, córrela, córrele que te van a matar. Córrele, córrele, córrela.
if you go and check out that full record, you'll learn very quickly why I've admired Stu's work for so long. He just has really amazing colors that he uses. The charts are incredible and the musicians are amazing. There's not much more to say. I mean, it's just the full package of amazing music in general. So if you go down to the link below, that's his website, and you can check out the fullness of his work. And then also at Bandcamp, which we put the link as well, you can go and support Woven Threads directly, whether it's through a digital download or just streaming it, or also getting a physical copy of the record itself. So go and support that, so that way it can benefit the artist, and then they can keep making more great music for us in the future. Now, moving on over to Monks, because we're plugging those Monks shows every week. There's some of these that we mentioned last week, but there's also a new edition, so I want to make sure to read everything that's coming up on the calendar. So right now, Andre Hayward is having his show. It's at 7:30, depending on when you're listening to this. So if it's 7:30 on September 10th, go and check that out. Maybe hit pause on this and run over there, listen to Andre, and then come back and listen to this a little bit later. We'll be here either way. So check out Andre Hayward, September 10th at 7:30. And then the next show is going to be on September 13th, which is going to be Elias Hasslinger, and that's going to be incredible. And then just announced, we have on September 15th, it's going to be Red Young's trio, Red Young and Austin Legend. So go and check that out, support that. And then on the 17th, the fourth of the guest of the podcast was Sparky Thomason, and he's going to be leading his group as well. So go and support that and listen to a bunch of really great charts. And so I hear it, there might be a very special guest. So tune in there and find out who it's going to be. All right, enough of me talking. Let's jump right into the episode. Here is episode 11, Dr. Adrian Ruiz. This is Off the Bandstand. Man.
Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you. It's good to finally meet you, because if I'm not mistaken, we haven't formally met, right, in person?
No, we have not.
Right. Well, that's the worst kind of like way to approach it, because it's like, well, we haven't formally met, and you're like, well, actually, that one time at Elephant in passing, and it's like, oh shit, I forgot, So I'm glad it wasn't one of those kind of situations. But man, you look good. How are you?
I'm okay, man. I'm just coming off a high. I had the live stream yesterday over at Monks, and it was nice to play with Colin, Sam, and Daniel again. Those have been my main man with my working group now for 6 years. So yeah, it's my first time back since March 13th, and it felt good.
Man, it sounded great. Like I was all morning, I was checking it out, and it just like there were so many great tunes and a lot of stuff that I actually want to talk about from that live stream and from the album at some point. But just to kind of start out, like, how have you been during all of this? Like, have you been kept busy with, because you teach too, right? So
I do. Yes.
You busy?
So basically, during the pandemic, once the pandemic started, my teaching situation switched to a remote learning model. And I was doing a bunch of that through Google Meet over at St. Stephen's Episcopal School. Mm-hmm. And boy, it was a unique transition, to say the least. So, but it all worked out. The students did the best that they could. All the teachers did the best they could to make the transition. And it was, there was a little bit of a learning curve involved for a lot of us, students and teachers alike. But, your ability to succeed is measured by your ability to adapt. So we all needed, we all did what we needed to do to make it happen. So, but again, as I mentioned before, the students were really graceful during the process. And we're all going to come out the better for it going through that experience, because probably to start the school year, at least for the first 2 weeks, we're going to be under yet another remote learning model. So,
yeah.
But other things that I've been doing during the pandemic. I mean, fortunately, I've been able to acquire numerous projects, just writing horn arrangements and
cool.
writing arrangements for various people. I did my first remote recording session about 2 weeks ago for John Mills times 10. So that should be coming out, on the social media platforms at some point here real soon once it gets all doctored up. So, just getting into Logic, and just kind of adding to the arsenal, right, of the 21st century musician in terms of getting all that together. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Well, it looks like you've got a home office. So do you have like a little studio kind of set up for things like that, for the remote?
Yes, I had everything put away right now, but I mean, I certainly have a microphone. I have the interface and all of that business. But no, yeah, I set everything up in here and work off. I'm zooming in with you on my desktop, and fortunately, it's still up to date. And I do all the I've done the remote projects on my desktop. So
sure,
it's been cool. It's been a really neat experience, man. A lot of it's great to have a lot of friends that are very proficient with the information. So being able to lean on some folks to get up to speed on what to do. So
yeah, I've been doing a little bit of that too. There's a record that we're doing remote where a friend of mine in Houston, a guy named Stephen Forrest, I don't know if you know that trumpet player. I don't know how well connected like the San Antonio and Houston scene is with cross players, but Stephen wanted to put together a big band record for his late father that just like unexpectedly passed, and was like, well, this is like, I think something that my dad would really enjoy. And so doing some like a variation of Bob Carnell's LA big band arrangement of what was it, Minuano, and believe it or not, like a Wonderwall arrangement, which is sure to get some laughs. But that Paul Anka stuff is actually pretty killing. Like, it's great.
It's hit, man. I love it, man. People think, well, maybe it's cheese factor number 10, but no, I love it, man. I love all that stuff, man, that he put out. I mean, if anything, he gave more notoriety to a lot of those artists that he covered, the original artists that recorded all those tunes. But he did a rendition of Smells Like Teen Spirit, right?
Yeah, man.
All that stuff is great, man. But good on you, man. Good on your friend, man, for doing that situation and bringing music to the people, man, in these strange times.
Yeah, and it was cool too because he I was grateful that he took the initiative himself to do it, and I was just asked because I can't imagine, like, I mean, I'm sure like we could all try to figure it out, but trying to figure out what instrument to track first whenever you're doing something like that, you're trying to create an organic sound in the most non-organic type way, but there's no shame in it because you have no other choice, right? We can't crowd into a studio and be in a confined space where it's all about keeping everything out and keeping everything in, sound wise. And so anyways, it was really nice that he took the initiative on that, and I just get to be sent the mix down of the full big band thing, and I sing over it and then send it back. And I guess singers could get flack because it's like, well, you got the easiest job, man. Like, we already send you the done thing and then send it back. But yeah, man, it's been fun.
I mean, it certainly is a process, man. But people, at least a lot of the things that I've seen, man, people are getting around the curve and getting it done, man. I'm sure it's going to be stellar, Christian, man. That's kudos to you, man. That's great.
Yeah, man, it's going to be fun. But, man, enough about me because I'm not the guest here today. I mean, certainly we can trade back and forth. But, man, I wanted to talk about a few things. So the live stream was really great. I tuned in and I was listening to the pre-show, I guess, where he was playing. your record, but I didn't know it was your record at the time. And I was like, who's this? Is this like Freddie? Or like, who's this playing? And I Shazammed it as it was going. And I was like, oh man, this is Adrian and your record, which is Premiere, right? A collection of originals. Yeah. And I was like, man, you sound ridiculous, like amazing. Like, I think I've been in the room while you've been playing, whether it was with Tonic or Now or one of those bands over at Elephant. At some point in time, I remember hearing you play, but at that point I was really scared to kind of talk to everybody that were just these like giants of the scene, right? Because if you come to Austin or you go to San Antonio, your name is definitely like among there of like all the people who are like the really heavy hitting cats. So but yeah, so anyways, I was listening to that and then listening to your originals, not only on the record but on the live stream. And man, one of the ones that I immediately wrote down that I wanted to talk about was Thoughts of You, because that is super killing, man. Like, talk to me a little bit about that arrangement.
Okay, well, the original title that was coined was Pensamientos de Ti. So that's essentially Thoughts of You in Spanish. And I mean, I am married to such a wonderful woman. She's what I consider to be a 21st century Renaissance woman. And she's very artistic. And she's also a pretty savvy businesswoman. She's an artist. She's a published author. You know, for a while, she was writing a lot of books that dealt with relationship advice. She also co-wrote a book with her grandsons, my step grandkids, you know, concerning the subject of cyberbullying and bullying and stuff, you know, physical bullying and things like that. So, you know, I really, really married up. There's no question about that, you know. But she's my inspiration. She's been my inspiration. And I wrote that especially for her. So I was playing a benefit in San Antonio. And if I can remember, we were playing Song for My Father. That was one of the tunes that was called at this benefit. Yeah. And I played this one line, and she's like, she kept rewinding the video because she took video of it. She says, oh man, this one part. And I think the little melodic germ was something like, beep, bop, boop, beep, bom, beep, bop, boop, beep, bom. And then I just took that little line and I varied it. And, you know, that little germ turned into a tune. And, you know, that's, you know, since she liked it so much, I decided, okay, well, let's see how much I can draw out of this. And, you know, another big inspiration. Have you had the opportunity to meet the trumpet player, Pete Rodriguez?
I haven't, but I hear his name.
Okay. Oh, he's grade A stellar. He's based in Georgetown, and he comes from a hardcore musical legacy. His father was a legend in the salsa genre. Pete El Conde Rodriguez, the Count. He's was a wonderful salsa singer. He was part of the Fania lineup, the Fania record label in New York City. Real famous for, you know, putting out the Fania All-Stars. Celia Cruz was part of that label. And a bunch of really, really heavy Latin jazz and salsa artists were on that label. But anyway, I digress. But Pete Rodriguez was also an inspiration because he's an extremely rhythmic trumpet player. So I decided, okay, well, you know, I found this melodic germ, you know, that my wife really was endeared with. And then I thought, well, what would Pete Rodriguez do? So I just kind of went along those lines and just kind of trying to stretch the material. And, you know, fortunately, the compositional gods, you know, smiled down on me favorably. Sure. And I was able to churn out this tune. And it's wonderful because the way that I think about it is, well, I have a certain bass line in mind, right? Or I have a certain drum pattern in mind, or I have a certain, you know, harmonic progression in mind. But this is what I love about Colin Shook, about Sam Pankey, and about Daniel DeFord, because Colin can obviously comp something out, or like say, all right, well, maybe the direction of the progression should go here. And, you know, just adding a little bit of extra that way. And Sam Pankey's like, well, maybe consider trying this bass line. I guess the point is that these guys can certainly take your ideas and make them better. So that's what I always love. You know, I come up with a tune, or these guys, they're great writers themselves. They come up with a tune and everybody adds their own thing to it. And that's what it's about, right? It should be an organic process. And so, you know, that's how Pensamientos de Ti came about. So
yeah. Well, man, I'm super curious about that as well, like your process of writing. So do you typically churn out, I know like we just kind of talked about it briefly, but do you typically churn out the tune yourself, or at least have like a total sketch of the completed thing? Or do you do a lot of collaboration where you say, okay, I have an idea, or I have a melodic idea, or I have like a vibe, or like an emotion or a vivid imagery type thing, and then you say, all right, now let's create it together? Like, how do you feel, as from a composing standpoint, you benefit from that process best?
That's a great question, man. I mean, early on in my process, I mean, I still consider myself, I'm 48 years old, but I still consider myself a young composer, man, because, you know, a lot of my career, you know, in terms of when I started the writing process, I started out as an arranger. Okay. And I was doing arrangements for horn sections at first. And then eventually, as I gained more experience doing that, and, you know, fortunately, you know, I fall into both sides of the coin, you know, being a street musician for many years, and then also having the opportunity to go to school. So I have formal training, you know, in composition, and formal training in you know, my study of trumpet and in arranging and all of that. But then, you know, being, you know, coming up playing Tejano music in San Antonio, I learned a lot on the street, you know, about, well, listen to this record or listen to that record, or, you know, a lot of, you know, my mentors, try this, you know, let your ear be your guide, you know, all those kinds of things, you know, because you can't learn everything in a classroom, right? And that's what makes a lot of writing unique, especially for a lot of the people that you know, are composers that never even know, you know, they don't even know how to write music. They don't know how to read music. But anyway, early on, it was more of a collaborative situation, because I guess maybe a lack of trust on my part. And then also, again, being the youngest in many bands and having, you know, the opportunities to be involved with bands that had a lot of experienced writers already, you know, in a lot of musical situations when I was, you know, in my formative years. So early on, it was more of a collaborative process. I maybe bring in a sketch. It's like, what do you guys think? And then, you know, a lot of people would add their 2 cents in. And then, you know, as when I was getting a lot of pointers, and then going back to school and learning, you know, just different processes to formally organize my thoughts. Then a little later on, and you know, now to this point, it's become more of an individual process, you know, where I'm able to formulate all the ideas on my own. And you know, lately I've been able to bring in completed ideas. And then, but that's the beautiful thing, that even when charts are complete, you know, I have a bass line written out, everything's formally done. It's never in lead sheet format. I have a, you know, I mostly do quintet writing, or even if I do, you know, because I also am the musical director for Kirk Covington and the Devil Horns, Captain Kirk and the Devil Horns. So even with that project, I mean, I write out all the horn parts, their individual horn parts, and I write out a rhythm chart, or not a rhythm chart, I'm sorry, individual rhythm section charts for guitar, piano, bass, drums, but everything is like formally written out. And then, you know, it's like, all right, guys, you know, this may seem done, but it's not done, because, you know, you know, kind of like the Beethoven approach, right? He was ever the revisionist, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, maybe this could work better. So then I tweak it, and then I reprint a part, you know, with the tweaked part, whether it's in a horn part or whether it's in a rhythm section part. But that's the beautiful thing to play with such wonderful musicians, especially Colin, Sam, and Daniel. They're like, well, I think this will work better. Try this. And I'm certainly open to that, man, because that's what it's all about, especially in the medium that you and I have chosen to express our musical selves in with jazz. I mean, we have to be open to those kinds of changes. You know, it can't
Yeah.
be just this real rigid, stringent thing. So.
Absolutely, man. I think there's so many things that, like, as you were talking, it was just like thought that I was having that were all just like really great points that you were making, especially to the humility that comes with bringing a piece and then knowing that it's like, okay, I'm a trumpet player, I'm a singer, and so now I need to, you know, I have this idea based on what I have known by my ears of the people who I like and the things that I listen to, and I'm trying best to replicate that. But you really never know what works best on the instrument, specifically, like respectively with every person, until you kind of get like a masterful musician on that instrument to say, yeah, I love what you were doing here, but it might be more effective if we do this instead of this, right? And then having that humility to go back, which is great. And I certainly wouldn't call you a young composer in the sense that it sounds like it. I mean, it doesn't sound like it at all. It sounds like your stuff is so beautifully calculated, but organic. It's really beautiful. I mean, the record too, all throughout Premiere, I was like, wow, it's just banger after banger after banger.
Thank you. That means a lot, Christian. Thank you so much. I mean, obviously we're all our own worst critics.
Sure.
But it's gratifying, and it's even that much more rewarding to hear somebody like yourself say something like that. Because, I mean, again, yes, I know I'm the subject of the interview, but kudos to you on your new record, man, because, you know, I mean, I think there's a commonality between what I was talking about and even the process that you delved in with your record. Because, man, you know, David Mesquite, man, Marco Antonio Santos, man, Ben Trish, you know, those guys, I mean, it's the same thing. I'm sure there was a lot of the same processes involved in terms of what I talked about, because, you know, the trust that you put in those musicians concerning your vision, and for them to be able to churn out what you guys churned out collectively was it's fantastic, man. You know, it's in my regular rotation, and you know, your record's going to be in a regular rotation for a while, man. So, I mean, we're all here to serve the music. We're all here to help each other out to get the musical message across.
Sure. Well, man, I can't tell you, and I don't want to just repeat the same things that you'd said to me, but really, I mean, that just means the world to me from somebody of your stature and somebody who I have looked up to and respected for a very long time. By hearing you, whether it was live or videos or record, what have you. Yeah, man, I think that what you were saying about your early years of collaboration in the originals, that's kind of how my approach is now, where some of the ideas are fully formulated, but a lot of it, I mean, my main collaborator and the person who I work with most often and feel like we just totally understand each other, not only on an arrangement, but a color, like the colors we create and the composition side of things, is David Mesquite. I mean, he's just like ridiculous. And he's one of those guys who, like, really, even whenever he has like the teaching gig, he's shedding multiple hours a day. And you can hear when he comes to the gig from a Thursday to a Friday to a Saturday, he's just getting better and better, and his discipline is ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, that the process of my second record, where we did a couple original, or I guess we did 3 originals on there, and then tried to do some arrangements. I mean, he really, on the arrangement side, took the driver's seat, and on the composition side, we worked together. But then there is this feeling, I think, for younger, and I don't know if I could necessarily call myself a composer. I would say that I have composed some pieces or written, but
and I mean, let me validate that you are a composer. I mean, if you have even an embryonic, tiny germ of an idea that comes into your mind, that is you. That's what you have. That's your offering, man. So here I am. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm any sort of authority, but you know, I just want to validate that.
Oh man,
yeah, that's what you are. You know, you're a composer, and you and I are certainly and I know I can speak for many others, but man, you and I are really blessed to be on the Austin scene.
Yeah.
Because in your particular situation and all the, you know, besides your solo project and whatever else you might be involved in with a side band, in my situation as, you know, as a band leader as well, and also being a sideman on numerous projects, both you and I have the luxury of being surrounded by these creatives that are, you know, really savvy with composition, that are really savvy with arranging. We, you know, it's the best of both worlds, man. And the point I'm trying to make is you only get better by surrounding yourself and being involved with these people, man. It's the way that I think about it, man, is it's always a lesson. It's always a lesson. Even hearing somebody in an improvisational aspect, you know, whatever it is that they're composing on the spot, it's like, man, that's a cool lick. That could be an idea, you know, or, you know, I often, with the numerous projects that I'm involved with, I have the opportunity to play a lot of original music, man. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would be involved with so many projects where I'm playing so much original music. I mean, I love, you know, expressing myself in other genres of music, but man, you know, this is a really good situation. I'm at a really solid point in my life where it's like, okay, you've arrived to something that, you know, you're thriving in, you know, just playing other people's music, original music. And then, you know, I miss San Antonio. I love San Antonio. There's a bunch of creative people in San Antonio, but it's just more commonplace in Austin. And, you know, we get the best of both worlds here, man.
And it's a privilege, not to sound like a cliche, but it's a privilege to be trusted with people's original music because, like you said, we have so many incredible musicians in Austin, and you could have on any instrument, any number of people who get the call instead of you. And maybe, you know, people were booked and you were one of the sub calls or something like that. But even still, you were one of, like, not you, just the general you, like, we are one of the sub calls. So then the fact that we get to go and be trusted with these people's original music, something that I don't think anything could be more personal to a musician than, you know, hearing your music and your ideas that you have worked on, not only in like a sense where it was in your head, but then you have spent the time to notate, which is a whole different animal, right? Like notating music is like a nightmare, right? Like I learned that my freshman year of college. Like there was a classical piece that was written in shape note notation. And it was like a lower choir whenever I first got there. It was like university singers. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just impress this guy, Matthew Altman, who was a guest professor for a semester, who was the musical director of Chanticleer, which I don't know if you know that group. But and then I was like, oh, well, I'll just impress him and I'll go and put it into finale because I'm taking a music technology class. And I like went and turned in a very, very shitty first edition that I was really proud of. And he was like, and just like went through and started marking. And I was like, whoa, this is like an entire other world. So these people who do notation stuff for a living is crazy. But anyways, I digress back to the main point. You're right. It's incredible. And I am learning. I can just speak for myself. I learned so much more with the people that I surround myself on the bandstand. Like the people who I started playing with, I was kind of gifted a big band once I first got into town within the first 6 months to 8 months. And I mean, the people I was around were like Marcus Graff and Russell Haight and Brian Christensen, and then rhythm sections like Alex Brown and Ben Treesh and Litdu, Dan Durham, and all these different people. And it was like, holy hell, like I am easily by far the least qualified person on this stage, and I love it. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Right. That's how we get better, man. You know, you surrounded yourself. I mean, that's the thing. Even to this day, it's like you surround yourself with people that are better than you, man. Yeah. And that's how you learn, you know. And like I mentioned before, you know, OJT, right, on the job training, you know, you're learning on the spot. And, you know, just like I tell any budding young musician or any budding young composer, it's like, you can't learn everything in the classroom. Don't think that once you get that piece of paper, if you're fortunate enough to get that piece of paper, you graduate, then all right, well, I have all the skills that I need when I get out there. No, you know, it's still a learning process, you know, and trial and error. And, you know, just like you know, we've all been through that, you know, in terms of the notation situation. You just learn by doing over and over again. I remember when I was up and coming myself, you know, it's like, all right, well, you wrote the tenor sax part an octave too low, or, you know, you're dealing with transposition errors, right? Or, man, you know, the bass part is or the left-hand piano part is an octave too low. Write the left-hand part up an octave and then write 8 VB or something like that. So that way it's more readable. So, and then once you learn all these tricks, then it becomes more convenient, you know, for the rhythm section. It becomes more convenient for the horn players. And then, you know, you get the behind the scenes kudos. It's like, oh man, thank you so much for taking the time and the care to, you know, to put out these parts. You know, you save time, you save money in the studio, you know, by getting all the behind the scenes stuff together behind the scenes and making it as solid and giving as much information as you need to give. But it's all a process, man. It's all, you know, you learn by doing, right?
And to make sure to give those guys credit, I realized I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent, which may be the subtitle of this podcast video series, me going on tangents. But to give proper due to those guys, like you were saying, Marco Antonio Santos and Fabio Augustinus and Ben Triche and Matthew Maldonado. I mean, ridiculous. The last track on that record he's doing, which is an original melody over the piece changes, Bill Evans' piece changes. But Marco wrote the arrangement, and Matt, like it was nothing to him, came in and recorded 2 flute parts, 2 clarinet parts, bass clarinet, alto saxophone and tenor saxophone, right? Or I think it was soprano saxophone and tenor. And just like killed it, right? Like it was nothing, and just, you know, once or twice through each one and was like, all right, we're good, put it all together, did a multi-track. But yeah, with all of those guys, I really had one-on-one conversations with each of them, and I was like, look, I feel like all too often singers make records entirely about them, right? Like we hear the story of like Nelson Riddle writing the arrangements for Frank Sinatra, and then Sinatra pulling him aside in the mixing room and being like, don't you ever write stuff that covers me up again. You know, it's like, it's too focused on the singer, and singers get a bad rap, and not for bad reason. And so I was like, this record should not be a record about a singer. This should be about, we have a common vision, and however many horn or rhythm section solos there needs to be to get that out, like, let's do that. I don't want it to be all about this. So I had conversations with him, and I said, look, you know, here's an idea of what I want for this kind of vibe or this kind of groove or this kind of color, but I want you to tell me in your expertise what is best, which to some people could be interpreted as maybe laziness, because it's like, oh, I don't want to have to write it myself. And I don't know, maybe subconsciously there was a little bit of that in there, but I would hope not. It's really about.
No, man, look, listen, you're not thinking like a singer with that process. You're thinking like a musician. That's important, man. I mean, you're exploiting, and I don't mean exploiting in a bad sense, but maybe I should rephrase that. You're tapping into what I feel is, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches, man. The talent that we have here, the local talent that we have in Austin, man. You know, that's what I always say. We're like 10, 15 deep on guitar, man. You know, we're, you know, 10, 15 deep on each respective instrument. You know, there's a lot of great singers here too, but it's an embarrassment of riches, and you're tapping into that, man. And, you know, I think it goes just beyond being a singer. You know, it's a musical approach, you know, and you're sharing, you know, that's the nature of collaboration, man, you know, and you did it right. That's a wonderful approach.
Yeah, I mean, it was
the way to do it, man.
It was a blast, and we're already working on a 4-part next one. So hopefully that'll come to fruition once COVID is gone and away. But I want to talk about Premiere too, like your record, to highlight that because it's so good. I mean, just like coming out of the gate, Elvinism is ridiculous. So like, where did that come from, and then when did you write that? And like, were these compositions like over a certain course of time, like over a decade of originals, or was it all just kind of like, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna make this record, within a couple years or something like that?
Well, the vision that I had going in was to put out a record with original music. I mean, usually, and I mean, I'm not saying that this is the traditional path, and I have the utmost respect for people that that have come out with a collection of standards first, right? So, man, the great Elias Hasslinger, who's always been a huge hero of mine, and I was fortunate enough to be a graduate teaching assistant with him. We both worked in the theory department as grad assistants at Southwest Texas State University. Freddie Mendoza, great trombone player. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of meeting him, but the three of us were the theory grad assistants together. But
cool.
But Elias comes to mind. His first solo record was a collection of standards. Of course, he had his own stamp on it. I think he recorded that record in his early to mid 20s. But people choose that path. To put out a collection of standards first with their own particular twist on it. But
I even wrote down on my notes beforehand, like it says, album of original before standards. Like, and there's absolutely no shame in that. It's, if anything, it's more admirable because it's like usually people try to wade into the water with something that is already pre-existing, but you were like, no, and I think it was your first record, right? Premiere was your first?
Yeah. This is my first record as a band leader. Yes.
Yeah. So holy crap. So continue.
There were different iterations. When I formed my quintet, this was basically the second incarnation of my quintet when I formed it in 2012. It was my first year of grad studies at UT Austin. I was working on my doctorate at the time. And it's like, all right, well, I've met enough great players. And, so there were a couple of different iterations. The band, we first started out as kind of like a Blue Note tribute situation. So I had transcribed or arranged a bunch of material from the Blue Note era of the 60s, the 50s and the 60s, late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
And then eventually we morphed into doing a collection of material from the Miles Davis Bitches Brew period, so material from the mid to late 60s into the early 70s, off records like Miles in the Sky, Bitches Brew, Jack Johnson, Live Evil, things like that. And then, when I had the personnel that I have now, in terms of when the personnel with the rhythm section was solidified with Colin, with Sam, and with Daniel, and Gil Del Bosque, of course, being a charter member on saxophone, then that's where, I approached everybody because I knew they all knew, had the ability to compose. So that's when we took a turn and started to delve into original materials. So some of the stuff had been in the works basically since about 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Elvinism, getting back to Elvinism, as I go off on a tangent, Elvinism was something that I wrote for, I had Daniel DeFore in mind. So I wrote that for Daniel, specifically for Daniel DeFore. So, when Daniel would warm up before a gig, he would lay down this one pattern that is affiliated with Elvin Jones. It's known as the Elvin Mambo. So it's a real special thing. If people go and check out a record by Larry Young entitled Unity, Larry Young was a great jazz organist, and it has Elvin Jones on it. It's got Woody Shaw on trumpet. It's got Joe Henderson. But if they check out a lot of the material on that record, I think that's probably one of the quintessential examples where you can hear the Elvin Mambo pattern.
Yeah.
And, Daniel, can channel Elvin Jones. He's just such a high level talented drummer. He can channel so many drummers. he's got his own voice, let me make that clear. But, he would channel the Elvin Mambo, and I said, okay, I'm going to write something around that, with Daniel in mind. And of course, it's entitled Elvinism because, the great Elvin Jones was the one that originated that particular pattern. So that's how Elvinism came about, just hearing Daniel channel that particular pattern. And then, so I wrote it for Daniel, and in honor of Elvin Jones. So.
Yeah, man, that's got to be like the nicest feeling too, like for, someone like Daniel, right? Where a tune is written specifically like to play to the strengths of a player. I mean, it's like one of the greatest gifts that you can give, to a musician that you highly respect. Because not only does it say that you highly respect them, but it's that you respect them enough to trust them to be the quintessential inspiration of the chart, right? And like you said, I mean, Daniel is far out, man. Like he's like
absolutely
the greatest drummer in town, not to say anything, and we have like incredible drummers in town, like not to put down anybody else, but he's just I said this to him, and it was a huge part of our segment on the first episode, but I was like, man, you are just the most melodic player. Like he, I listened to that video of him at Jazz Texas where it's like focused on him on the kit playing Emily, and it was like 10 minutes long. He didn't play the same thing twice,
right,
the entire time. He's just so innovative and
right. And it's amazing, right? Because it's all in service to the music, and he'll tell you that in his own way, But again, going back to the phrase that I said earlier, an embarrassment of riches, man. You got Daniel DeFore, you got Wayne Salzman, you got Kirk Covington, you got Fabio Agustinis, man. Aaron Parks, and I know I'm leaving I have a lot of wonderful drummers in the back of my mind right now, but that I've had the good fortune to play with in the Austin area. Brandon Garrett down in San Antonio, man. It's truly an embarrassment of riches, man. And how deep, the roster goes on each respective instrument here in the Austin area, man.
Yeah, and
but talking about the trust issue, like you said, I was in a unique situation. Well, I don't know, at least unique to me, but usually groups are formed by playing with people that you commonly play with on each other's projects, or maybe it might be somebody that you don't play with very often, but you happen to be in that band together for the time being. But the extra added bonus for me was the fact that Daniel and I were in grad school together. He was working on his master's while I was working on my doctorate. So we played in the UT Jazz Orchestra together. So I'd already had experience playing with him in an academic setting, and I had experiences playing with him in a professional setting. Same thing with Sam Pankey. Sam and Daniel overlapped a little bit. And then Gil Del Bosque was in school when I first started out. So 3 out of the 5 of us all had a chance to play together in an academic setting. And then in other people's projects. And eventually it's like, all right, you spend enough time playing with these people, then you have an idea. It's like, all right, well, you can kind of cherry pick the people that you'd like to be involved in your own project. So the trust was already established early on. And it was easy for me. And usually it's not an easy process for me, but man, sometimes, again, when you have the opportunity to play with these people on a frequent basis, it's easier for me personally to churn out a tune because you have, again, it's I had the extra added luxury to have played with these people, quite frequently before I form my own situation with them involved. So, Elvinism was one of those tunes where I was fortunate enough to be able to churn that out fairly quickly. So,
because you know what you're working with, right? You already know like whose strengths you can play.
Right. And that, like the other phrase, you know who you're writing for, right? So. Yeah,
absolutely. And then, one person that ashamedly didn't even think of whenever I was thinking of all the different drummers in town. But to further your embarrassment of Rich's phrase is, we have Butch Miles in our backyard. I mean,
yeah.
Holy hell, right?
Right.
Just like, and a huge member of the jazz history. I mean, at the top level too.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I remember being so, it's one of those things where you don't realize how privileged you are until like you're almost away from it. But I remember coming into school at Texas State or Southwest Texas. Yeah. And then, or Texas State when I was there, but obviously.
Right.
But yeah, and then like getting there and they were like, yeah, we got Butch Miles. And I was like, we got Butch Miles. Who's Butch Miles? And someone nearly just like, you know, like that Batman meme where he slaps Robin,
right.
was the kind of thing, you know? And,
I mean, can you imagine, you know, I mean, the pedigree that this guy has, obviously being a drummer with Count Basie. When Count Basie was living, here he is in our backyard, a resident of Kyle, man, on the faculty of Texas State University. And, you know, it's like, man.
Yeah. Okay, I lost you. It was right there whenever you said a resident of Kyle on the staff, and you were like, man, and then it focused right on whenever you said.
Oh, okay, yeah, so a resident of Kyle, I mean, can you imagine, you know, having a resident, you know, Butch as a resident of Kyle, knowing that the pedigree that he's had with playing with Count Basie's orchestra when Count Basie was still alive, man, and now he's a faculty member at Texas State University. But again, being in a lesson, you know, it's like being in a lesson. I had the opportunity on numerous occasions to be a sub for, you know, on the trumpet book for the great Rich Herring. I've subbed for Rich Herring on numerous occasions, but having a chance to play in Butch's band and hearing, you know, how it's supposed to be done, man. You know, a lot of these legends that have lived it, you know, you hear it in their playing, you know, there's just that special connection, you know, being once removed from greatness, if you will, you know, I mean, knowing that he had the drum chair with Count Basie's band and the numerous records that he's been on, you know, and just really all the talent that, you know, that he's made sound better because of his abilities. And boy, man, he's you know, he is as innovative, he is as intuitive as they come, man. You know, the Eddie Durham tributes that I've been fortunate to be a part of every year when Doug Lawrence comes in, as we pay tribute to the great Eddie Durham, San Marcos native, man, that started it all off early on with Basie's band and, you know, being an arranger, you know, helping with, you know, forge the Basie sound early on in the 30s and stuff like that. Being one of the pioneers of the electric guitar, you know, we pay homage to this guy every year, and Butch is at the helm, man. You know, every big band, every small band is defined by its drummer. That's just a musical fact, man. And, you know, being able to share the stage with them is an absolute lesson every time. We're lucky.
And that's got to be the greatest feeling too, because whenever you were playing with him, were you playing lead? Or were you playing?
Well, no. I mean, with the small group, with the Butch Miles Jazz Express, it's a small group. It's a sextet. So 3 horns. So it's trumpet, sax, trombone, and it's piano, bass, and drums.
Sure.
And then for the Eddie Durham tribute, you know, I usually play section and solo trumpet. But you know, having the opportunity, you know, when you're blowing a solo, and you know he's right there with you, man. You know, helping you to sound better, man. And you know, there's no better feeling, man, than playing with people like Butch, man, that do that. They serve the music.
Yeah, and I was going to say, too, like from my because I wouldn't claim to say, like, I am well, I guess maybe I shouldn't invalidate myself, but I'm a trumpet player, but I don't bring it on the stand that often. If it's like a duo or a trio thing, I'll play some heads and work my way through a solo. But whenever
don't invalidate yourself, man. That's just another part of your arsenal, man. You know, that's a part of the uniqueness that's Christian Wiggs, man. That's important. It's important to embrace that, man.
Man, you're the father of wholesomeness and beauty. Thank you.
Well, man, look, man, I've been teaching for a long time, and you know, it's it's my job to build up, not to tear down, man. But no, I mean, it's the truth, from one professional to another, man. That's awesome that you have that as part of your arsenal, man. I mean, I'm not a singer. I mean, again, it's never too late to teach an old dog new tricks. I really believe that. One of these days, I'll hopefully work up the confidence and, the wherewithal and have the bravado to start singing it, man. I mean, that's always been a dream. I've been doing background vocals on some projects, that I've been involved with. And so that's a step in the right direction. But, but anyway, embrace what you bring to the table, man. That's important. So,
well, any time that you want to trade a lesson, I'm right there, man. I'd be happy to do any of that and learn from you. And, but what I was going to say there with the trumpet player thing is just that, when I was playing lead in high school and then sometimes subbing on lead in the Texas State Big Band before I was gigging and couldn't really make it work where I was playing big band gigs outside of school and then also trying to do the ensemble things, a lead player and really just a trumpet player's best friend is the drummer, right? Because they set everything up for the lead player to be able to just, scream, out and make
it's all part of that sound pyramid, man. People have different philosophies, man, but the fact is that, lead trumpet's here at the top, man. Mm-hmm. That's the definition of, the direction of the phrasing, man. And, again, you mentioned Marcus Graff, man. Dude, as many gigs as I've had the good fortune of sharing with him on the stage and then being the conductor of the Now Jazz Orchestra when he was the regular, lead trumpet player. Mm-hmm. People like Kevin Flatt, man. People like Eric Johnson, Mike Sailors, man. Again, an embarrassment of riches, man, in terms of the people that can really lay it down and define the style, man. We have the best of the best, creme de la creme, arguably some of the best lead trumpet players in the country. Fight me. Yeah. I vouch for these cats, man, because they can lay it down, man.
Dude, I remember the first time hearing Mike Sailors was we were playing this big band gig with my big band in December, and it was like a Christmas party that some place in West Austin, some big wig was throwing on, and so it's at this house, and he gets there early because he's the consummate professional. And so we were chatting and just having a good time, trading stories and stuff. And then we get on the stand, we start playing the book. And I obviously allow for several areas of the arrangements for multiple solos. But we got to I can't remember what tune it was, but it was an extended, it was like a blues or it was Route 66 maybe. And James Suter had kept telling me all the time. I don't know if you played with James, but I mean,
yes, he's a regular. I mean, I shouldn't say sub, man. Yeah. I learned this from the great Dr. John Mills, man. Every person that's not in the regular, a regular cast of characters is a special guest, man. And he's a valued special guest in the group. But James can lay it down, man.
Yeah, James is my ideal player. He's my first call. I love him so much. But he anyways, he had been telling me so much, because we would play the Steakhouse gig every Friday night, 6 to 9 downtown, and kept telling me, man, gotta get Mike on a gig. And so it gets to Mike playing. I mean, his section playing as a lead playing is amazing. They're kind of trading back and forth with the guys in the section. And then he gets to Route 66 and just takes 6 choruses, all warranted. And by chorus 3, I looked at James and we're on the stage. People were, maybe this wasn't entirely professional of me, but I just looked at James, shook my head, and I sat down on the ground. Cause it was just I can't do that. It's an embarrassment. Like you said, it was just absolutely insane. His playing, and he has vocabulary for days.
Right. And he's another cat too. We worked on our doctorates together. He was a year ahead of me. So, trumpet advice, man, compositional advice, man. you learn from your teachers, you learn from your peers, man. And,
yeah.
I just, I mean, maybe he'll check this out when it's out, but man, I have the utmost respect and the utmost admiration for this cat, man. And, I feel like I'm drawn to him because we share the same birthday too, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's a few years younger than I am. I think he's maybe about 11 years younger than I am. But man, it's like, dude, January 31st, that's your birthday. Of course, I found out through Facebook. We're Facebook friends, but I was like, man, very cool. I said, no wonder, there's just kind of special, just a special feeling that an affinity that I have for this cat, man, because it's interesting because, man, he was already such a monster, when we were in grad school together. And then he went to New York and he came back even more of a monster, man. Yeah. I mean, don't, let him fool you. He can be kind of modest sometimes and say, well, I really learned how to play when I went to New York. I call BS on that because Sailors he came to Austin well equipped already, man. And, was captivating folks from the start, when he first got to Austin.
Yeah. I
love me some Mike Sailors, man. He's a good dude, man.
Yeah. And the episode isn't out yet, but we recorded his episode where we've got several backlog as we're getting them out once a week. But yeah, man, and we talked about that. We talked about his experience in New York and about how he was just like going, from getting there and slowly getting a call, maybe once a month or like a couple times a month, and then getting to the point where he was just like these first call subs for different shows and got off like a official spot in a show and just like that lifestyle, and then coming back and doing all his stuff. But I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. I feel like people sometimes, whenever we're in Austin, like we don't realize how spoiled we are, like with the folks that we have. And then, in the same way that we would, maybe not like the exact same way, but in the same way we would look at like rosters and lineups from like all these different great jazz festivals, we look at the same thing in Austin and we're like, yeah, these guys all measure up too. Like Colin's trio that he plays with all the time, which is subsequently your trio as well that play with your quintet. I mean, Colin and Sam and Dan Daniel are unbelievable musicians. Like I remember playing a couple of the first times with Colin, and it was just by osmosis learning all of this stuff. And then talking on the break, like the first gig we played together was at the Intercontinental Stephen F. Austin, which we had a residency at, and we're supposed to have a residency at starting. They were like, yeah, we're going to start your residency in April. And then in March, the pandemic hit, and it was like, hotels. But anyways, we were playing that gig, and on the break, we talked about how, I was at the time and still am, obviously this person is my main guy, and anybody in town who knows any conversation with me knows that I talk all about Kurt Elling all the time. But I mean, I was really diving in deep at that point, freshly into Kurt. This must have been 2017 or 2018. And Colin was telling me about how his main guy was Meldau, right? And he was like, I had to fully, and I was like, yeah, I'm always worried about diving too fully into it because I don't want to become a caricature of this person. But also at the same time, I really appreciate the idea of diving so deeply into someone's work that now you have all that vocabulary and you can choose when to pull nuances into your own sound where you want. And he was like, yeah, man, that's what you have to do. He's like, that's what I did with Brad. And then I was able to come back off of it and find my own original sound. But it wasn't until I had done a deep dive into the thing that I admired most that I was able to harness that ability and make something original out of it.
Right. I mean, just like the great Clark Terry said, man, you imitate, you assimilate, and then you innovate. So every time I hear any of these cats, it's like, they list their influences, and of course you hear the influences and they're playing, but with Colin, I mean, just kind of pointing him to specifically as an example, man, just the high level of independence that he has with both hands is astonishing. And then, where he might be doing this arpeggiated cluster in his right hand, and he'll just do this beautiful, of course, that comes from Meldau. I mean, that's a big Meldau influence, but he's made it his own. It's his own. It's his own, it goes beyond just channeling Meldau. It's his thing, He's taken it to a different level that belongs to him, and your phrasing, you've taken it to, when you sing, you've taken it to a different level that belongs to you. Once you go through any musician that goes through the process, where they're imitating, they're assimilating, and then eventually they're innovating. Yeah. People will say, well, he's channeling that. And that might be true, but if, it gets to a point where it's like, all right, well, that's you. It becomes you. Sure. Only something that Christian Wiggs can do. Only something that Adrian Ruiz can do. Only something that Colin Shook can do. So that's the beauty of it, How else, like I love the great Andre Hayward, man, you ethically steal. That's his beautiful phrase, man, Yeah. Check the records out, man. Those are the fathers. Those are the mothers, man. Those are the experts, man, in the music. You can't learn this in a classroom, man. You got to get back to the deep listening. And then that's where you ethically steal, man. Yeah. So speaking of that too, man, like where are you, and you kind of talked a little bit about like those specific Miles years that were very influential to the kind of sounds that you wanted to create. But like, tell me about like where you came up, how you came up, and then the people you were listening to, how that's evolved over time, who has been added to the list, but also who, if there's a main person, how that has been a constant stream throughout your career. Like what's that been like? Okay. Well, I was born and raised in San Antonio, and being raised by my grandparents, a lot of music that was played in the household was norteño music, conjunto music. This is music that's popular in northern, that originated basically in northern Mexico and of course crept its way up to San Antonio. And so it was a lot of Spanish radio. And then eventually that, I started to listen to more what was referred to as La Onda Tejana, which eventually transitioned to Tejano music. So if you can believe this, man, I didn't hear my first English tune, like top 40 tune until I was 11 years old, man. Okay. It was mostly AM radio coming up. And then we invested in a 1978 Ford Fairmont wagon that had an 8-track tape player in it. But cool. It had AM and it also had FM. And then I remember this vividly, man, tuned into 92.9 KITY in San Antonio. And there was a tune by a group named Santa Maria called You're My Everything. And I was like, whoa. And then that just kind of opened up a whole different world of listening. So I was an MTV kid, man, so I grew up watching MTV a lot. And, but, I was fortunate enough to have a band director in middle school that was, very jazz savvy. So, the real popular term in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s it wasn't a jazz band, it was a stage band, because, you play arrangements by, some of the more popular, artists of the day, like I remember doing a jazz band, a middle school jazz band arrangement of the Neutron Dance by the Pointer Sisters, things like that. And there were maybe a few gospel-oriented things that he picked, but there wasn't really any sort of straight-ahead jazz, no watered-down versions of like Basie or Ellington or things like that. Yeah. And then when I got into high school, I had great band directors. The head director was a performing musician, so he had a lot of experience. And he was also playing in one of the real popular orchestras of the day. Yeah. He had experience playing with the Paul Elizondo Orchestra. So he had a lot of knowledge. Great guitar player, great vocalist. So he's the one that turned us on. He and the assistant director turned us on to some of the more traditional things. I remember playing a version of Fun Time by Count Basie when I was in high school. And that's one of the rare, unless you're in the know, that isn't a tune that's very, very prominent, among a lot of high school programs, unless, the director really knows. But, that's when I started to get a taste of Count Basie and Ellington and other things, some more funk-oriented things. And then that's when I got introduced to the music of Beto y los Fairlanes in high school, man. Because both my band directors in high school went to Central Catholic, because Robert Skiles is originally from San Antonio. He's a Central Catholic from San Antonio. So they spent some time with him in high school. So they were already familiar with his music and his early exploits. So I got into the Latin jazz thing, and then, it really opened up for me when I was an undergraduate over at University of Texas at San Antonio, where many, many more influences had come into play. But even before I knew about the Miles Davises, the Lee Morgans, the Bill Evanses, and the Charlie Parkers and Dizzy Gillespies of the world, El Gomez, who's still a fixture on the San Antonio scene, he's arguably the most recorded trumpet player in San Antonio history. He's been on numerous records, but El Gomez was the one that really opened the door for me. And then through him, I learned about Lee Morgan. Through him, I learned about Miles Davis. And then I started to gravitate toward Miles Davis. I started to get real serious about the music of Miles Davis. I hadn't really heard very much Miles Davis. I was, just like any other young trumpet player, you're into Maynard Ferguson. I got introduced to Maynard Ferguson, but the 80s Maynard, where he was doing a lot more mainstream things. And then eventually, when I got to know Maynard, I got introduced to Miles, 80s Miles, where he was doing a lot of the, all post Bitches Brew stuff like that, where he was doing things like Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. He was doing a lot of collaborations with Marcus Miller. Like Mike Stern and John Schofield were part of his band. So I heard that. And then eventually I went backwards. And I started to get to know the records that Miles did with Charlie Parker, all the 50s prestige things that he did. And then in turn, El Gomez had introduced me to Lee Morgan. So then that was my introduction to the Blue Note Records label. So from Lee Morgan, I expanded outward to, not only just the great trumpet players that had recorded on the Blue Note record label, like Freddie Hubbard, Donald Byrd, but that's when I started to get into the composers, people like Horace Silver, Andrew Hill, great piano player, great composer that recorded on the Blue Note record label. So that's kind of how it happened, in a nutshell. I mean, I could talk about all this all day, but that's kind of in a nutshell how I eventually came to jazz. It didn't come right away. I didn't start to get really serious about it until I was an undergraduate. So
for sure.
But that's all a part of it. A lot of these tunes that, there's always going to be compositions, that I've written. I mean, there are compositions that I've written. There's probably always going to be compositions that I've written that are going to represent the Latin side of things, whether it's a bossa nova, whether it's like an ECM Latin vibe, or if you write something based on the samba, or about, maybe more of a Latin jazz vibe, whether it's a guaguancó or something like that. But it's just all because of my upbringing, the early conjunto norteño music, and then eventually playing in Latin jazz outfits. But that's just a part of me. That's a part of my voice, I was a product of my environment. So
we all are, man. It's really enlightening to hear too. And it's nice to hear that you had kind of started with like the Maynard Fergusons of the world, because that's how I kind of started too. Like I had started listening to Wayne Bergeron, and then because he had come to my high school, right? Or we had gone to a festival, and then he judged our high school, and then he ended up coming a couple years later after I had left.
I was fortunate to see Wayne when he was still a member of Maynard's band.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, of course, man. I mean, My Maynard experience, I'd seen Maynard numerous times before he passed away. The first time I saw him was in 1983. Again, my first trumpet teacher was a huge Maynard head. And then, again, he turned me on to those early records, and then eventually I went backwards in development. But, I had a chance to see Wayne Bergeron as a member of Maynard's band back in, it must have been, I might be a little bit off in my timeline. So just generally speaking, it was probably somewhere in the early to mid 80s when I first saw Wayne Bergeron, before he achieved all these wonderful heights, with all the studio recordings that he's done, being a member of Gordon Goodwin's Fat Band, doing his own thing. But it was a real special treat, man.
Super killing, man. Well, and another thing too is I want to make sure to be cognizant of your time. I don't want to hold you over past when you're able to be here. But a couple other things I wanted to quickly ask about was like looking also at your website and the people that you've played with there. I mean, it's all stellar, stunning, like holy shit kind of names. But like a few of them that I wrote down that I was just like, I have to ask about these. And I'm sure if somebody looked at the website and saw all those names, they'll be like, why are you asking about these guys? But these specifically hit a chord with me. So 4 names, John Clayton. What was that like? What, tell me about John Clayton.
Man, I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because early on in our discussion, when we were talking about composing, when we're talking about arranging and about just the learning process, you think about John Clayton, right? Being, having the Clayton Brothers band, right? The small group, that he does with his brothers and with his son. And then, of course, being a co-leader for the Clayton Hamilton Orchestra.
Yeah.
You can believe it, man, hearing it, from somebody that, like straight from the source, man, somebody that's played with Diana Krall and, recorded with numerous other people, living, his wife being Dutch, and then him living in the Netherlands and learning Dutch himself. But when you hear somebody like him say, well, I originally came to the arranging game as a member of the Basie Orchestra, where I just before there wasn't even any software notation, I'd write out a part.
Yeah.
People would put it on the stand, and when you're dealing with the heavyweights that he dealt with, people maybe could be nurturing with their advice, or, just giving, telling you straight up, this sounds like shit, man. You need this and that. But that humanized him. And, he is a quintessential educator, but hearing things like that, it's like, man, that gives me hope.
Yeah.
He's, one of those types that props you up. And if you notice, man, the guy plays with just the most endearing smile on his face, right?
Yeah.
So my first experience with him was when he was a guest with the UT Jazz Orchestra. We brought him in. This was my first year of grad school. And it was just a wonderful opportunity to be able to pick his brain and to share the stage with him in that capacity. And then I had another opportunity to share the stage with him when I was a judge at the Temple Jazz Festival about 2 or 3 years ago, where he was the featured clinician. And, all the judges that were involved, myself and I think Paul Deemer, Seth Carper, we all had an opportunity to jam with him at the judges and clinician jam session afterwards. So, so I had a chance to really, share the stage and let loose at this jam session. So talk about laying it down, man. Daniel DeFore was also a judge. So it's like, holy moly, man. Your regular working jazz quintet drummer and John Clayton laying it down in support of you. I mean, there's no better feeling, man, And at the end of the day, like I said before, man, they're human beings just like the rest of us, and, they talk about, well, he got a big break, man. I mean, he certainly put in the time and deserved to get the big break that he got, but just like anything else, it's a process. that a lot of these great musicians go through, just like everybody else, man. They're human beings just like everybody else, and got a break, and, you know, maybe work just a little bit harder than a few other folks to get where they are, you know, in their careers and stuff like that. But they've gone through the same trials, the same tribulations that we all go through, just to better ourselves as musicians. So yeah, you know, in a drawn out way, it was really a special experience for me, you know, being able to you know, be involved in playing with him not only once but twice. So it's really rare.
I can't imagine, man. The other person that I wrote, and I wrote down a few, but the other person I really wanted to get to, because this person by osmosis became a hero, and it was certainly someone who might have been one of the most pioneering vocalists of our genre, especially when it comes to like my like the fourth track on my record is Broken Time, but that's Nardis, right? But you have to change the title for copyright reasons whenever you
You're talking about the great Jon Hendricks.
Yes.
I knew it.
Dude.
Stand by. I want to show you something, man.
Okay,
Check
please,
this out.
please.
Hold on.
Please.
So hopefully this will be into focus, but
yeah,
this event here, it may seem kind of weird because of the reflection, but this is a picture of a concert that was done at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas in 2003. It was called the Elder Statesmen of Jazz Concert.
Okay.
So the featured artists were Terry Gibbs, the jazz vibraphonist who's pictured right here. James Moody on tenor saxophone, Clark Terry on trumpet flugelhorn, and of course the great Jon Hendricks. So this is a picture of me playing this concert, and this was the name of the group. The big band that I co-led was the Thrasher Big Band. So Gerry Gibbs, the drummer, is Terry Gibbs' son. So he was the one that promoted this event. But that's me having an opportunity to blow solo with Terry Gibbs conducting the band.
Dude.
So this next one I'm going to pull up is of all the cats, you know, on stage. So I'm sure you can tell the one.
It's a sailor's hat, man. He's got his captain's hat.
Yeah. So there's Jon Hendricks right there. There's the great James Moody right here.
Oh my God.
Clark Terry and Terry Gibbs. And then there's me, the little me sitting here all flanking the trumpet section right there. So
dude.
Yeah. So that was, you know, certainly a highlight. And then the great guitarist Polly Harrison, who's an institution and a jazz treasure on the San Antonio scene, is also a very, very fantastic photographer. So she's the one that documented these photos. So
wow,
I'm indebted to her for life. And my, you know, beautiful wife, you know, came up with a frame concept and framed these photos for me as a gift.
Oh my God, man.
So, yeah, these photos had been sitting in the black plastic wrapper for about 14 years. And then my wife, you know, came across them. She's, you know, and, you know, she just totally surprised me and wrapped these up and gave these to me as a gift and framed them for me. So,
man.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, well, you know, getting back to Jon Hendricks, I mean, just, yeah, you know, I mean, having the opportunity to be in the presence of greatness, but, you know, again, the human element, man, you know, just a common cause, you know, just trying to share the message with others and spread the message of jazz. And, you know, he was still at the top of his game, man. He hadn't really lost the step, man. You know, you know, just his voice was so clear, so strong, and anything that he did vocalese over, anything that he scattered was just pure gold that night. You know?
Yeah, because all of that, Lambert's, Hendricks, and Ross, and speaking of which, you know, the great late Annie Ross we lost, you know, last week. But I mean, talk about talk about entire pioneers of our genre, and just like, I mean, you listen to any of their stuff, right? Like whether they're doing Horace Silver stuff or they're doing, man, like Doodlin and Twisted and
Miles Davis's Four is, one of the ones that, that's one of my all-time favorites, man, where, they take Miles's solo and add those beautiful words to it, man. It's like, man,
Yeah.
So I always, when I was teaching a jazz history class over at UTSA, that was always one of my favorite parts of the semester, when I'd start talking about the concept of vocalese and, pulling up this YouTube link of them doing four. And I think this is maybe it might have been the Newport Jazz Festival or something like that back in the late 50s, early 60s. But man, just seeing a lot of the students just astonished, by, you could do that?
Yeah.
Not realizing, being heavily influenced by, a lot of the pop music of the day and stuff like that. But it's like, wow.
Yeah. And then to see that direct lineage too of like, Lambert, Hendricks and Ross, Jon Hendricks, Mark Murphy, Kurt, like that, and that's how, I kind of came, just like in the same way you came to know Maynard and then Miles and then kind of worked backwards. I came to be obsessed with Kurt. And then it was like, okay, trace it back. Mark Murphy, Jon Hendricks, and all these people, and just hearing how it's just unbelievable. And the amount of innovation that they moved on to with like Jocko stuff and Pat Metheny stuff that Kurt has done and John Clayton stuff. I mean, just bar none, amazing. Man, we'll definitely have to chat much more about Jon Hendricks soon. I do want to ask you one quick question before we have to go is we have everybody tell their craziest like gig from hell story to end of just like, what's the craziest thing that's happened on a gig for you? Okay. So take it away.
Man. So incidentally, man, that gig that Daniel Dufour shared about the Urban Achievers, I was on that gig as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we were both members of the Urban Achievers brass band at that particular time. But man, gosh, there are so many, man. Yeah. So there is one that I'll share though, man. And it does have to do with the drums. So this is probably when, again, maybe being obsessed with Maynard or something, but, just kind of, having a high note mouthpiece, right? And, probably a Shilke 14A4A or something like that at the time. And just being into like, oh man, all right. I'm just kind of on this, this high of being able to like, all right, wow, man, it feels so easy to pop out these high notes, right? And, not having a firm command of, how to work the airstream, how to arch the tongue, how to be more efficient. I just like have my cheeks puffed out and using the Armstrong method and, just all this pressure, all that works for a very short amount of time before you just blow yourself out, and the endurance just gets shot. But, I was playing a gig with a Tejano band, and I still remember the name of the club. It was called Candilejas, man. It was on the central, just north of the downtown area in San Antonio. So I went for this one note, right? So I ended up getting lightheaded, and I passed out a little bit, and then, bam, I hit the drums and totally obliterated the drum set, man, all the cymbals and everything. And, I was just laying flat. And, I didn't feel it yet, but man, I just totally killed my back. I landed on the bass drum. And so I fell back, I passed out, man. And, it was like, man, when I came, the music stopped and everything, the whole crowd just like, you just hear like this, whoa, and then, there was laughter ensued after that. So the other horn players, were like, they picked me up and, certainly, shortly after the gig, it's like, man, we love you. You still got a lot to learn, kid. You're fired, So, yeah. You know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, man.
Sure. Jesus. Well, that's a great story. That's one of my new favorites, man. Well, Adrian, we've got to do this again. We got to, whenever we can, safely get together and have a drink. I'm buying. We'll make the hang. But man, for now, thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much.
It's an honor. It's an honor, brother, man. Thank you for doing this, man. Thank you for shedding some light. And you know, certainly featuring a lot of really wonderful musicians, you know, around the Austin scene, man. You're doing a really great thing. Keep it up, man. And again, you know, continued successes to you and all your other endeavors. And I look forward to whatever, you know, you have in the iron. I know you're gonna, you know, you talked about this other 4-part series coming out, so you have a fan in me, man. So whenever that comes out, you believe you have my full support, man, on anything that you put out, man, and it'll all be gold. I know it will. You know, you'll always have the right cat surrounding you, man. So you got your wits about you. So hats off to you, man.
Wholesomeness and beauty. Thank you so much, Adrian. Do you have anything you want to plug real quick before we go?
Well, just, you know, if anybody might be interested, I do have copies, physical copies of Premier Collection of Originals. They can go to my website, adriangruizmusic.com, if they're interested, or, you know, if people want to purchase through any various social media platform. It's on iTunes, it's on Apple Music, it's on Spotify, and, you know, all the major social or, you know, the media platforms that stream, all the streaming platforms. So any support will be greatly appreciated. All original music, homegrown in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, man. And then everybody go check out the Monk's Jazz show that you've got, that stream on YouTube, Facebook, the whole thing. And we'll put links to all that stuff in the description.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you again, Christian, man. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to you soon, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.